Do not make any radical decisions without consulting your primary care provider first.
I
And
love
this
it.
episode is not intended to provide any medical advice, cures, none of that. It's strictly for entertainment and educational purposes.
Lottery. We won the lotteries, but I would not be able to deal with a couple
For
losses.
them, I do believe in traditional gender roles. So for those of you who don't, this does not apply to you
In
because
my house, I have the last word. Yes, love.
oh my god.
So welcome to another episode of the podcast. This is episode number 10 of the Transform podcast. And I am here with Victoria, my friend, and she will be the guest for today's episode. I'm extremely excited to get to know you more. And what we're going to be doing here today is just having a casual conversation and have fun.
Absolutely. Thank you for having
That's
me
right.
on. I am excited to be here.
Beautiful. So Victoria, the first thing that I have for you is tell me about you. Who's Victoria?
I am a registered nurse. I started off as an LVN. For those who don't know what that is a licensed vocational nurse. In other states, it's known as a licensed practical nurse. I was working in that field for about 7 to 8 years before I decided to go back to school. Became an RN, followed in my father's footsteps, who was also an RN. And I've been working as a nurse ever since.
Wow. And where did that passion originate from?
I was always inspired by my father's commitment to the field. And I knew that I wanted to be in a field that I would be able to make a difference and also have a stable future for myself economically and for my family.
Beautiful. We usually in every field, I think we say that we want to make a difference. What does that mean for you?
It means going above and beyond the routine requirements of working as a nurse and really finding what makes you happy. So, for example, some nurses are dedicated to oncology, other nurses are dedicated to working with pediatric populations. The beautiful thing about nursing is that you don't have to choose one, but it is important to hone in on where you want to make the most impact.
Tell me more about you personally. What are the things that you like? Tell me about you growing up. Share more of
So,
Victoria.
so I was born and raised in the great city of Los Angeles, not Louisiana, Los Angeles, California. My mother is from Brazil, the beautiful country of Brazil, and my dad was born and raised here in the States. I speak Portuguese, Spanish, and English, of course. So I kind of consider myself coming from a Afro-Latin background, even though I was born here in the States. I originally wanted to pursue a career in music, a career in fashion
Mm.
design. I'm good with drawing and makeup and all of those more artistic things. But as I said, I opted for a more stable and more noble career. So that kind of has carried me through the past few years. I love spending time with my family. As you know, our communities are very family oriented. They come first God, and then our families. And I love traveling and getting to know people, whether it's locally here on LinkedIn or out there in the real world where I'm at, where I'm working, or even in school.
I've noticed. I actually noticed that you're very committed and very passionate about connecting people. That's how you and I got to know each other. One day you just did a chat out for me, and I'm like, who is she? Like, where did this come from? This is so awesome. Tell me about that passion and how did that, that spark to connect with people online, and how did you get familiarized with LinkedIn and other social medias and the art of connecting people?
So actually, that is an interesting story. My connection with LinkedIn sparked or began after I had attended a some sort of symposium. It was a neurological symposium hosted by neurologists, actually based in my mom's country.
Hmm.
And I found it so interesting. I said, let me go ahead and start connecting with a few of these people with the intention of gaining a little bit more insight into the neurological field. I was still enrolled full time in school at the time. And then after a while, I thought to myself, okay, this is excellent that I've got some solid connections in the field of neurology in my mom's home country. But I can't just, or I shouldn't just connect with people in my field. I need to branch out and meet other people, right? Because you don't know where you're going to be. So ever since that day, this was what, maybe a few years ago, I've been committed to connecting with people in a lot of different fields. And the overwhelming majority have told me that it's a great thing. I haven't really received a whole lot of negative feedback on that. Of course, there are always a few individuals that are a little bit pickier with their connections, which is fine. You know, it's a free platform. But aside from that, it's been such a blessing to run into other people with so many different talents, and even to meet some people that I can call friends to this day.
Wow, that's awesome. And you mentioned that you wanted to hear a little bit about me as well, so we'll make it a back and forth. My journey is fairly similar, right? I was very niched down into a sense that I just knew who I knew, and that was my circle. And one day I get exposed to different people that had a different set of beliefs and different mindset that I had, and they were the ones that encouraged me to go and pursue, expanding my network and my connections. And that's what brought me to LinkedIn. Like, I did not exist online in 2020. I didn't exist. I dare you to go find me. then then in 2020 I started on LinkedIn and started, trying to add value as much as I could to people, right? And either by adding inspirational type of content, or, a day in the life, or follow me type of videos. And I really, really like videos, and my network started expanding. And I will walk into places and people will be like, "Joe, are you the guy from LinkedIn?" And that stuff just kept motivating me. And to this day, like, I still get surprised of how many people locally here, at least in my area, in Miami, Florida, I walk into places and they know who I am, and I have, like, I've never met them. So it's an
That's
incredible,
awesome.
incredible amount of value from having an online presence and an online network. And it's, I got to meet you that way. So that's a testament to that. So
That's
pretty awesome.
beautiful.
I,
That's
by the
beautiful.
way, eu quero aprender a falar português.
Ah, ok, tudo bem. Nós vamos trabalhar nisso então.
I was born in Cuba, as you know. We spoke about that last night,
Of
and I,
course.
I made it out here in 2006. And my dad had an opportunity to migrate to the U.S. through the green card lottery, and
Wow.
so we won the lottery. We won the lottery, and
Thank
that's how I got the
Wow.
opportunity to come here to the U.S. And I've lived here in Miami ever since, pretty much. Have you have you ever visited Brazil? And you said your father was born here, but his family, where are they from?
No, so yes, my father was born here. Well, to answer the first question, I've been to Brazil many times. We used to go about every year when I was younger. I haven't been back in almost 10 years, but that's just, been by choice. Life gets a little
Right,
busy.
right.
My dad is originally born and raised in Denver, but he left Denver, Colorado, came to Los Angeles as a teenager. And that's really what sparked his journey to become who he is. He's African American descent, but he is quite familiar with the Brazilian culture. He knows all of my family pretty much on my mom's side, and he's been there many times. He loves the Latin culture, much like myself. Not surprised. I look just
A
like him
smart
in
man.
personality. He's brilliant. He's brilliant, and
That's
so that kind of is his background. He is kind of like me in a sense that he is interested in different cultures. He's taken it upon himself to learn bits and pieces of other languages. I studied Arabic for about 6 months before I started
wow.
nursing school, and I taught myself to read and write a little bit in Hebrew when I was in high school as well. So there's always been that, kind of circling back to your question, there's always been that desire to connect with people, and I'm kind of just trying to find where that best fits in this and the socioeconomic status that
Yeah.
we live in now.
It's a mentor of mine once told me that the world, it's, if you're in business, you would always be in the business of people, because you're one connection away from just achieving anything you want, because you never
That's
know.
right.
It's like that concept in the 5 degrees of connection, that you're like five
Hmm.
contacts away from anybody in the world. It's similar to that. It's, if you take good care of the people that are in your circle, like, your opportunities are infinite in that way. Talk to me about,
Absolutely.
bring me back to arts and music.
Okay, so I actually come from a family of musicians in a sense. My grandfather, Pedro, his name was Pedro Peter. He never went to school formally to study music, but somehow he was able to learn how to play I don't know, at least 5 different instruments growing up.
Wow.
Maybe that's because of the childhood that he had. I don't know a whole lot about him. I just know that he was very talented in that arena. Going back to my mother's side, they did grow up in Brazil. They did grow up in a Christian home, thank God. And my grandpa pretty much stuck an instrument in every single one of their hands, and they had to learn how to play instruments in church. So either they would sing, or they would play the guitar or the drums. I have an aunt here who is based in Houston. She is a musician, so she plays the bass, guitar, drums, and she sings and she produces. My mother plays the guitar. She's one out of, I think, maybe 10 or 11 brothers or sisters,
Wow.
and half of them all play. So music has always run deep in our family. My father is not only a clinical medical professional, but he's also a theatrical arts major. So before he got into medicine and snapped into reality, he had grown up with an uncle who was actually a producer back in Los Angeles, back in Encino, California, for any California people out there who know where that is. And he grew up right across the street from the Jacksons and Aretha Franklin. So most people don't know that. Of course, they wouldn't know unless they asked. But our whole family, to an extent, has always been very artistic. I've known how to draw since I was younger. Like I said, I don't draw as much as I would like to anymore, but I do know how to design clothes, and I've always been very good with makeup and hair and the beautification process. So it's strange that I became a nurse because it's kind of shifting away from a more arts-based career, but I have found that that has been helpful in nursing. For
Mm.
example, when it comes to drawing blood, when it comes to starting IVs, when it comes to doing wound care dressings, those are all very hands-on uh, tasks that can be taught, but a little bit of finesse is helpful. So I've found that dexterity has been helpful in my field, for that lack of better description.
That's good. That's good. So it comes with the genome in your family then. That's awesome. Tell me about the stuff that you're doing today. Tell me more about work if you can, obviously. Just tell me
Sure.
the parts that you can, and just tell me how the average day goes, and how's it a day in the life?
Absolutely. So I was working full time at a hospital, at a big hospital, for about 10 months. Made a decision due to various reasons to step away from that environment. And ever since then, I've been working as an independent nurse contractor. So a typical day, for example, it will either be staying local or traveling to a different state. I've had the opportunity already to go to Louisiana on an assignment, and I will be going even up here in Texas to another city in a few days. So I either do biometric screenings, we do vaccines, we do education for a variety of different clients. Some we would consider A-list clients, others just local businesses around here that are looking to procure our services. But I've always been in this line of work. I just did not uh, take a full-time position in it because I was working in the hospital. And also I am a full-time student. I'm enrolled at the master's program at Walden University, and I'm in the family nurse practitioner program with the hopes of being able to graduate within a year and a half.
Wow, not an overachiever at all.
No, 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 no. They're just
Uh, Oh, that's
regular going
awesome.
going through the motions.
Good for you. I actually, through my employer as well, right now they actually help me, they sponsor my MBA career. So I just finished not too long ago. I think about a year ago.
Well, that's wonderful.
So good
It's
for
always
you.
nice to be able to go back to school. It's not nice. I think it is essential to be able to go back if you have the opportunity to study. It's such a privilege to do that. And it opens up a lot of doors, as it has for me ever since I became an RN, went back, got my bachelor's, now enrolled in my master's. Even now, the opportunities that have arisen are incredible.
Yeah. And a good tip for those students out there, it's actually easier now somehow. I don't know why. You're more focused, I guess. You just hone into your studies. At least that was my experience. My
Hmm.
MBA was like the easiest time that I had in school because I actually loved being there, right?
To
And I
study.
actually wanted to receive the information. There was also a time I just wanted to be out partying and having a good time rather than being in school. So that was
Fair enough.
that was quite funny. Tell me, this is one of the questions I always ask every single one of my guests, and I think it brings a ton of value to the audience. It's Tell me about one or more misconceptions in the field of medicine and nursing and health as a whole. What are some common
Sure.
misconceptions that you've heard that maybe you would like to debunk?
Sure. So, a common misconception, especially about nurses, is that we're just robots, that we just have an endless supply of energy, an endless supply of empathy, and an endless supply of compassion. Our fields that we choose, in all fairness, subject us to a lot of pressures,
Hmm.
internal and external pressures. Internal from our internal conflicts that we deal with on a daily basis when we're dealing with different patients and different medical situations, and also from the outside world, right? From a corporate perspective, from a colleague perspective. It is very difficult to balance those out regardless of the nursing field that you're in. So some people do it a little bit better than others, but as nurses, we're still humans, right? We make
Yeah.
mistakes, we fail, we have our vulnerabilities, and we do a very difficult job. I think another common misconception is that, well, nurses get paid very well for what we do. We do get paid well. Well, we can get paid well, absolutely, for what we do. But most of us are not in this field strictly for the money, because there are other things you can do to make money that don't take a mental, physical, spiritual toll. We are in it because we care about what we do. So it's the compensation is adequate for what we do. Not to mention, we do risk our lives. Wait, for those
Yeah.
that are working in the ER setting, right, working critical care medicine, for those that have worked in, excuse me, a psychiatric setting, such as myself. Those are not easy, cozy places to work. And once more, we choose where we work, but it doesn't matter. We choose to put our lives on the line every single day, and really no amount of money is ever going to be able is going to
I
be
agree.
enough to compensate for that. But the common misconception that because we make so much money, we are um, infallible, we are superheroes, and that's not how it works. We have to wake up every day, and for those of us who believe in God, ask God to give us strength to keep doing what we're doing every day to achieve a bigger purpose.
Yeah, and I commend you because, like you said, it takes quite a beat from you guys to do the work that you do. So I've seen it firsthand, right? I've had family members that have had the need to go to the hospital and be taken care of by nurses and doctors. So I definitely have seen firsthand the amount of work it takes and the commitment that you must have to do that type of work. I would not be able to do it, to be honest with you. So
We
I,
feel that same pain. We cannot express, or we know we're not technically allowed to express our pain the way we would, right, if we were not in a clinical setting, because we're supposed to be the clinicians, the providers in charge. But that doesn't mean that we don't go home with those stories. We don't go home with those traumas, and we do care about what happens. Oftentimes, we can feel like we don't have control of the situation. Even a well-seasoned nurse has had his or her moments where they do question, is this the place for me to be?
yeah,
So I think that there are some factors, some external factors that can be manipulated to help ease that burden in that arena. But at the end of the day, we have to do a big balancing act, because we're not just nurses, we're secretaries, we're assistants, we're we're CNAs, we're therapists. I'm not claiming to be any of those without a legal formal license, but
right.
we wear
But I
more
get
than
it.
one hat.
Yeah. I get it. And that's
Absolutely.
the therapist part is the one that would just that's why I couldn't do the job because I cannot deal with so much pain and so much loss on a constant basis. I would not be able to deal with that. I like an atmosphere where I'm, building up people. And I know that you guys do that as well. You help patients recover the large majority of times, but I would not be able to deal with a couple losses. It's just my mindset. It's not ready for that. So I
It's a
commend you.
lot.
I mean it. I mean it. Tell me
Thank you.
tell me about any of those crazy misconceptions we hear out there about health, specifically like eating sugar is bad for you. Anything that maybe comes to mind on regards to health, not nursing.
So as far as like a popular health trend per se,
Right, that might be completely
so
wrong.
Sure. So first disclaimer, do not make any radical decisions without consulting your primary care provider first.
I
And
love
this
it.
episode is not intended to provide any medical advice, cures, none of that. It's strictly for entertainment and educational purposes. I I personally don't believe in limiting anything unless you've been specifically told to do so, because what happens occasionally is that can give rise to a little bit of radicalism. What
Mm,
I mean is, when you're making a decision of what to consume and what not to consume, you shouldn't do it based off of a list or because Dr. So and so told you when you were watching, your latest episode of whatever show. It's always important to take into consideration the patient's total health, right? Stress levels, diet, exercise, psychosocial factors, relationships, all of those things play a role into somebody's overall health. So before you make a radical decision, it is important, I believe, to speak to a qualified primary care provider about the changes that you want to implement. Ask for their opinion. You can always get a second or third opinion if you don't like the answer. But it's difficult to say generally speaking, because people have a lot of different coexisting morbidities, and
yeah,
some
yeah.
people need more sleep, some people need some more protein, some people need less sugar. I can attest to that myself.
So
So
just if I'm hearing you right, just like personal finance is personal, health should be a personal thing, and you have to tailor it to your individual needs.
100%. The goal in nursing, and not just in nursing, but specifically as relates to going back to a master's level subject, we were always taught about evidence-based practice, right?
Mhm.
Meaning we need to do, in layman's terms, we need to eh, do things that make sense for the general population without getting into all of the intricacies of EBP. But it's not just doing what is best and what is recommended and what is economical, it's doing what is best for the patient.
Yeah.
Right? We're trying to get away from that sort of not dictatorship, but that sort of autocratic system in medicine where I'm the provider, or I'm the person in charge, and I tell you what to do. Not anymore. We have to take into consideration the patient's cultural preferences, religious preferences, economic limitations, right? All of those restrictions that can affect their care. So much like finances, I think people often want a quick answer. How do I get rich quick? It doesn't work that way. You and I both know I would love to get rich quickly, but that's not how it works. You should opt for a tailored approach. The way you can get the best results, because along the line there may be risks that you're willing to take or not take, and that could definitely change your treatment plan. I'm only speaking to you as if you were a fellow colleague nurse, right? Because these are the things that we have to work out as well when we're going to go provide education for the patient. We can give you education, but at the end of the day, we can't make you accept what we have to say. And also, we can't just say what we want because we feel in our hearts. No, we have to talk about things that are backed by clinical evidence, backed by the medical community.
Wow.
So
But
there's a lot that goes into it. It's not as easy as everybody makes it seem.
what you just said right now, like, make me feel a whole lot more comfortable with going to medical facilities, because if it's treated just like you explained it, that is what every patient would want, which is, take care of me, not just because you say that this is what we have to do, but this is because this is the best for me.
Absolutely. Patients have rights, and you'll see that posted at any medical facility. They do have a right to refuse, they do have a right to an explanation of services. And I think a lot of people, or many people, can be intimidated by providers and clinicians, and it shouldn't be that way. You're going there to procure a service, we're there to provide it, but you do have the right to know what's going on. And if there's a concern, you shouldn't be coerced into it. Um, that's a totally separate
Right,
medical issue that
right.
we're not
I'll
talking
ask
about
you,
coercion.
but I'll ask you about that. I don't know. Maybe this is just me, but I doubt it. I am a person that has a certain degree of authority, right? Because I'm a manager. Like, I deal with people all the time. Like, I'm very comfortable around people. Similar to you, like, we have an aura of, like, authority in a way, if you call it like that. But when I walk into a doctor's office, like all my authority is out the door, and this person becomes like, in my mind, it's like this is like my father now, or like my boss, or like whoever, like whatever this person says, that is it. So it's like the mindset behind being a patient in front of a massive figure of authority, such as a doctor or a nurse. Why do people get concerned or afraid in front of you guys? Have you ever heard from patients, or maybe yourself, you've noticed that that's what happened? A person could be extremely qualified, but then they just become zombies in front of a doctor.
Absolutely, because once you get into that doctor seat or that clinical chair, once you're the patient, you are the person that is the most vulnerable in that situation. You have your locus where you can control the work environment, you can control your home environment, you can control elements of your personal life and your health, of course. But once you get into that seat, you're talking about somebody that is qualified to make medical, clinical judgments about your situation. And I think a big part of that is the fear that there's something either that we can't control, or the fear of something that we're not willing to take on. So fear, unfortunately, fear is a good thing in certain instances, but when it comes to receiving health care, and I can speak for myself because it is difficult to be a patient as a nurse because we know a lot, but it's important to be humble when you're going to see your provider. And I think what is helpful is to be open-minded. Remember, you don't it's not about what you have to accept or not have to accept. You're going to a qualified, hopefully qualified professional for an opinion, for a medical opinion, for medical advice, if they are a physician assistant, any other person, DO, qualified to give medical advice in that arena. And so it's important to take things with a grain of salt, but the idea is that you do have some control over the situation, but as humans, we do fear the unknown. Absolutely. That's
That's
not your work environment, that's not your relationship, that's not your home environment. You're talking about something that you may have absolutely no control over. Unfortunately, like a diagnosis of cancer, right?
right.
An unexpected diagnosis of heart failure. People get diagnosed all the time with things that they either were not aware of, or they didn't know this ran in their family history, or they were not aware that their health habits were contributing to X, Y, and Z. It is a lot of fear of the unknown in that instance. That's one reason why I can speculate.
What could the average folk do to improve their health?
Exercise moderately, consult with a primary care provider before taking any
I love it.
written advice. Like I said, I'm not qualified to give any medical advice. One thing I would say is try and keep your stress levels down. For those of us who work in high stress environments, that is almost impossible to do, but we do have a choice over what we allow in here and what we allow in here.
Yeah.
So the fact that somebody has a stressful job is not an excuse. That will come out, unfortunately, it can come out as a bad health outcome,
Yes.
right? I can only speak for myself. I was diagnosed with high blood pressure at a young age. And I said, oh no, what, why? My father was also diagnosed with blood pressure at a young age. And it was when he was in nursing school. It was when I was in the middle of the nursing program. I'm not saying being enrolled in the nursing program causes high blood pressure. I'm just saying that that was part of a bigger game that was at play that unfortunately worked against me to help produce that diagnosis, along with some dietary, modifications that I could have made. But knowing what I know now, I try and keep my stress levels low, try and drink a little bit more water, try and consume less salt. I try to walk in the park when I can, and enjoy my free time, and not always look to do something. You don't always have to do something in order to be productive. Sometimes you need to rest and recuperate. And in this high paced society that we live in now, I'm sure you're quite aware of that,
Oh
being in
yeah.
a managerial position, there is this tendency to want to have control of everything. And as humans, it's just not possible to do that. You have to know how to let go of something. If not,
It,
something else is going to give.
it's a fallacy anyways. The only thing we could control is like what we're thinking right now on this very moment. Everything else is just it's just an illusion.
It
So
is right. The illusion of choice. No, that's the matrix. But yes, in a sense, absolutely. We can't control everything, and we shouldn't try to. It's silly because then the unexpected happens, and then you don't know how to deal with it. It's good to be present in the moment as much as you
I,
can be.
My wife is gonna love this episode because you've dropped some nuggets here that are phenomenal. So tell me about the best piece of advice you were ever given.
Oh boy, best piece of advice. Okay, it doesn't come directly from my father. It comes from a pastor that he always used to listen to. I believe that his name was Charles Stanley. He recently passed. Obey God and leave the consequences to him. What when I hear that, what it means to me is you need to do the right thing, right? In whatever instance that might be, however difficult that might be. But when you do the right thing, the outcome will be what it needs to be. And I know in life we want to say that if you do good, things are going to end up well. That's not how life works, and
Right,
that's not
right.
realistic. There's plenty of figures in the in biblical history, also in secular history, if you want to look back, that did the right thing, and it cost them their life. I'm not talking about being a martyr in a sense. This conversation is not about martyrdom, but even if things don't turn out the way you want them to in that moment, it still is important to do things as best as you can. And it can be very easy to go the opposite way when there's a temptation of manipulation, a temptation for bribes, a temptation to disclose information you're not supposed to. We all have those work temptations, and they look different to everybody. So, biggest piece of advice: just obey God and leave the consequences to Him. Do your best, study to show thyself approved. You're not going to get, you don't are not entitled to anything. Nobody's going to give you anything. You need to work hard for what it is that you want. But with some hard work, you can. The sky's the limit. I truly believe that.
Beautifully said. Beautifully said. I I wonder, do you have a theory on why so many of us have an issue with following that advice?
It's my opinion that we want to see instant success. We want to be recognized for the things that we've done and the things that we have, the causes and people we have contributed to. But that's not typically how it goes. I don't know if in Spanish you guys have a saying, like a refran about that, but I guess translating into English, what comes fast leaves fast. And so I could use the get rich quick scheme. There's no such thing as a get rich quick scheme. There are
No,
many
there isn't.
schemes, but there's no strategy to become rich overnight, short of an inheritance,
Or
short of
maybe
playing the
having a business
lottery.
and scoring good, but I mean, that takes time and
Sure.
effort.
But even that takes time, right? Most businesses don't skyrocket the day that they launch. It takes some time to see the return on that investment. And so patience is a very important aspect. You were talking to me earlier about the five, degrees of separation, and sometimes that gap is a little bit wider, sometimes it's a little bit shorter. But I'm a firm believer that all it takes is one person,
Hmm.
the right person that can come in and and really change your life. We're not waiting for somebody to come in and rescue us. That's not the point of the message. But the point is to not take these connections and these interactions for granted, because that might be the person that decides to invest in your personal education. That might be the person that decides to sponsor I don't know, a work visa. That might be the person that promotes you to a higher rank in the company. That's the way that I think. You just don't know. You're not waiting for somebody to give you something. You're not waiting for somebody to change your destiny. You need to take the proper steps in order to set yourself up for that success. But we need people. There's no such thing as independence. We are codependent.
Very true. Very true. That's fascinating. Tell me you then, what piece of advice would you give to someone listening to this podcast episode right now?
I would say value the people closest to you, your family, your mother, your father, if they're still living, your wife, your children, if you have any. And even for those who are not in a marital relationship, it doesn't matter. There's people that are close to you that value your time, that love you, that are invested in you. Give them the time and the space that they deserve. Because above all, material things come and go, but you might not have a chance to maintain that connection with that person or those people over a lifetime. And two, don't be so hard on yourself, right? How we were talking about investing, for example, you choose to invest to start a business. It's not overnight success. Many people that we see that are famous today, that are successful today, went through a lot of ups and downs, and probably more downs than ups. But that's where you get the strength to get back up again and start over. So if you don't see that instant success, those instant likes, those instant ratings that we're so addicted to in today's time, don't be discouraged by that. Keep doing what you're doing. If you're in school, finish your degree. If you're working, be the best employee that you can, and always treat people kindly. You never know who you're running into.
Very true. Give yourself some grace, right? As
Mm-hmm.
simple as that. Give yourself some grace and love yourself first, and then do do the same for everybody else. Isn't that what,
That's right.
what we're supposed to do? The world will be so
It
much
never comes
better
that
if that
close.
was the case.
Absolutely. And like I said, we do things sometimes, often expecting that somebody's going to give something back. That's not the point. You don't get points for being a good person. While you're on this earth, it's your job to be a good person. And you don't know what lives you might impact because of that, because of not losing your patience, right? Because of those $2 that you gave. You just don't know in a grand scheme of things how you're going to affect somebody's life away from a material sense. Like I said, things come and go, but the impact that you make on somebody's life, that can be eternal.
Yeah, then listen, you've done it today. Like the perspective. That's why I love to do this thing, because it's like you brought me stuff today that makes sense and that I know and that I've heard and that I practice by just hearing it, just visualizing the image that you paint when you articulate your words. It's like so refreshing, and it brings it to the top of my mind. So it's like I feel energized and full of optimism just from hearing you speak. So it was awesome.
I wanted to ask you, what do you do? What do you enjoy doing? And do you see yourself merging into a different line of work, or do you want to keep doing what you're doing now? I know that's a
So
little general, but
right. So I'll give you a lot of background information on me on
sure.
like a speed session. I I am a banker by trade. I have been in banking since I turned 18 years old. Never meant to become a banker. I was studying to be a doctor, or that's what the
Um,
idea was, right? That I wanted to become a doctor because at 7 years old I got burned, and doctors
mm,
and nurses saved my life. And my parents always said, I think you should be a doctor. I also believe that I wanted to be a doctor. And then I get here in 2006, and I'm working. I'm, trying to make it happen because I'm an immigrant. I don't even know what is right and what is wrong. And then I'm working at Burger King. And one day they entrusted me with going to make the Saturday deposit at the bank. And that was that. I was so nervous that I was just talking like crazy, asking questions like rapid fire style. How do you become a banker? How do you count the money? How do you make sure that the money is legitimate? And all these questions. And the kid says, dude, you ask so many questions that you'll be a great fit for this position. Why don't you apply? We're hiring. So at 18, I became a banker. I have worked almost every position imaginable within a retail branch of a bank. So
sure.
teller, banker, teller supervisor, you name it. And I'm a
Wow.
branch manager now. I oversee a region in Miami, Florida, and
Wow, that's
and I
wonderful.
right.
Congratulations.
Thank you. So
That's
now
huge.
what I'm doing now is just mostly dealing with businesses and just doing lending and managing the whole banking relationship. That's mostly what I do now.
Okay. That's
So a lot
wonderful.
of
That's a great career.
a lot of a lot of connections, a lot of business development as a whole. So my day to day goes, I'm here overseeing my team, and at the same time I spend maybe 75% of my time outside of my retail location, just handshaking and meeting new people and going walking into businesses and understanding holistically what they do and in which ways they could potentially grow with my help. So
Sure.
it's fascinating. It's a fascinating line of work. And what are my interests? I love jujitsu. Believe it or not, I'm a Cuban that practices jujitsu. I've been fighting since I was I don't know, I think 11 years old.
Okay.
I did Taekwondo in Cuba. I got to, I became a regional champion back then. Then I came here. I practiced with MMA masters for I think 2.5 years. And then I've
Okay.
been with Arise Jiu Jitsu now for I think 2.5 years.
That's awesome. That's a great
So
athleticism. It is
I
important. That's a great field to get into.
I always say that I am a banker in the day and I break bones at night.
And a ninja by night. Okay, I got you. Always good to have
Uh,
another trade. Don't quit
yeah.
your daytime job, but it's always good to have
So,
another job.
just trying to do just like you said, without a guarantee, right? Because there's nothing guaranteed in life, but I am trying to do my very best in every single area of my life, regardless of the outcome. And I think you are my health relationships expert for this podcast. Tell me how can someone transform their health or relationships today?
Oh boy. Okay, let me speak a little bit to relationships. Oftentimes we go into relationships with a set of unrealistic expectations from a person that doesn't exist. We create this perfect person in our minds. This is who I'm going to marry. This is who I'm going to have a life with. And or we meet somebody and then we want to make them fit into this mold of what we want. What you want is important, but being married, the goal of being married is not to get everything you want in life. And as somebody that's been married for 12 years, and for me, somebody that's been married 4 years with a child along the way, a child on the way, there is a lot of sacrifice that has to be made in order for that relationship to become something beautiful and stable. Because much like in business ventures or in the professional field, you're not always going to feel like doing something. You can't be motivated by feelings. Sorry. You can't be motivated by feelings. You have to be motivated by a choice to continue pursuing your spouse, right? Much like you continue to pursue a business venture. Your spouse is not a business proposition. You can't just chuck him or
Right.
her. You have to, excuse me, not put, you have to put them first above everything. And also another thing that is important is knowing when to hold your peace, right? Knowing when to opine, knowing when to support somebody. You're not there to fix your spouse. You're not there to make everything okay. You're there to be a support system for them. I do believe in traditional gender roles. So for those of you who don't, this does not apply to you because it's a totally different dynamic when you don't believe in those traditional gender roles. But life is hard enough. Your
Yes.
spouse, it gets a lot of pressure, specifically the men get a lot of pressure from being out there battling other men in the real world and sometimes other women. And they don't want to come home to chaos. You need to be their support system. That way they have something to give back to you. It's a give and take relationship. It's not a 50-50 relationship. It's 100 and 100. Well, maybe not 100, 70-70, 80-80 on a good day. But
Yeah. My
that's
my
what,
wife and I watched a video once or an explanation of some sort where it said it can be 50-50 because some days he's at 20 and then you put up 80, right? And then sometimes you're at 10 and he's putting that 90. So it's about that balance, that compromise, and that, I think that that's what actually love is. It's not the emotion, it's just
right.
the relentless commitment to making it happen. That's my interpretation of love.
Absolutely, because what happens when your spouse or you get sick? What happens when a child, God forbid, what happens when a child gets sick or passes? What happens when you lose your job? What happens when you lose your house? That emotion is not enough to keep things in the real world going. So at the end of the day, like the president of Kenya said in relation to a fairly controversial topic, when the time comes, or paraphrase, the people of Kenya will have to make a choice. When the time comes, many people are going to have to make a choice about where they want their relationship to go. And if you just give up whenever things get hard, some people are at a bit of a are in a position to be able to do so. I'm not justifying that at all, but the reality is that when you've committed your life to someone or you've committed yourself to a cause, you're going to have rough days.
Oh yeah.
And you have to choose. You have to just, get over the hump and do what you have to do and pick up and start over again sometimes. Oh, and say you're sorry, even if you didn't do anything.
Like I say,
Apologize.
in my house, I have the last word. Yes, love.
Oh my God. That's right. Well, they say happy wife, happy life. No, that's not how it goes. Both parties need to compromise. That's the big word that you made. Both parties need to compromise. Um, because like I said, at the end of the day, your spouse is typically is going out there and taking care of a lot of stuff that he or she does not, doesn't necessarily want to do. They don't feel like doing that. But in order to fulfill those obligations and duty, right? Something that is almost non-existent today. We don't
Yeah.
talk about the obligations and duties that a wife has, or the obligations and duties that a husband has. Everything is kind of put on this egalitarian, esoteric playing field, and the reality is that's not how things work. If you're managing your branch, you've got people that are under you, and you've got people that you have to respond to, whether you like it or not. There's a certain level of control, that you have to um, exhibit, not by
Right.
being a tyrant, but by leading by example. And you're learning how to do that, even many years into the field. You never stop learning how to be a better person, how to be a better leader, and that includes having downfalls. That includes having to say, "I'm sorry."
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely. That was phenomenal. I think we have a lot more to talk about, and we'll definitely do another one of this. I think we'll have a, how do you call it, a continuation on what we did today.
continuation of episode
It
that
will be
that would be
phenomenal.
wonderful.
Victoria, it's been an absolute blast and joy for me to have you here today, to get to know more about you. I think that you and I have so many synergies that now more than ever we're gonna be more connected than ever, because I
That's
really,
right.
really, really, really loved your vibe. You're just such a wonderful person. I really, really appreciate your time here today, like sharing this moment with me.